Hello, everybody. Hey, this is John Fenn, Church Without Walls International, CWOWI.org. And today coming to you on location, which I'm not going to tell you where that location is because I'm taking a break. So airplane mode is on, and I'll be back in the office in the first week of September. As I'm recording this, is the last week of August. All right, Church Without Walls International, CWOWI.org. You can go there, sign up for my weekly thoughts, which is a weekly email that comes out each Friday morning in the U.S. and Saturdays in Australia, and points on the other side of the date line. Also, my e-newsletters where I share prophetic things. You can learn of our next Zoom meeting, September 24th, and our conference in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, which is a suburb of Tulsa, October 8th through 11th. This is all 2020 as I'm recording this, so thank you for bearing with me if you're past that date. Today, asking the question, what do you do when someone injures you? Now, I'm not talking about physical injury. I'm talking about the injury that occurs emotionally when someone hurts us. And to get into that, I'm not talking about imagined, I'm talking about justified hurt. In other words, because a lot of people get hurt, a lot of people get offended. Even our society is looking to be offended, looking for offense. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when someone genuinely hurts you, and it's not, they're just not right in doing so. For instance, maybe sister so-and-so backbites and spreads rumors about you, but on Sunday morning she's up there singing the special, during the offering at church. Or maybe there's a Christian businessman who, comes in and does sloppy work and charges you an arm and a leg when he works at your house. Maybe it's something where you maybe put some money down on a piece of equipment or property or something with the promise that you could get it back. And after all, this brother or this sister's a Christian, and then you change your mind and you want to get it back, and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's already been spent." Those are genuine injuries, genuine hurts. Those are things where people actually do you wrong. I'm not talking about differences of opinions and stuff that makes you mad, because Jesus was justifiably angry and without sin when he cleared out the temple because they turned a sacred place into a marketplace. And in Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, when he asked the simple question, is it okay to do good? Is it right to do good on the Sabbath? And they held their silence. And Jesus says he looked on them with anger, being grieved because of the hardness of their heart. That word hardness there means a layering effect, like you put on a layer of stucco or paint and let it dry, and then you put on another layer, let it dry, put it on another. And Jesus was grieved and he was angry with them because they knew to do what was right, but they didn't do it. That's justifiable anger. So what do we do about an injury? Well, I want to point you to Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, where Paul said, "You who were dead in your sins and trespasses," or trespasses and sins, he has made alive. God the Father has made alive. Now, the word, I want you to see sins and trespasses. Sins are vertical and trespass is horizontal. And this is important to understand. A sin it can be done just between you and God with nobody else involved. But a trespass is always horizontal. And because we're made in the image of God, we could say that a trespass, horizontal, what I do against my brother or sister, is also a sin because they were created in God's image and in his likeness. And so all sin, a sin is between you and God, and a trespass is horizontal. So recognizing this, and Paul mentions this in Ephesians 2:1, what do we do with this? Well, back in Leviticus chapter 6, verses 1 through 7, is the case where the Lord lays out some hypothetical situations involving the sin of the trespass. This is the law of the trespass. You see, the trouble is that when someone trespasses against us, we think we are supposed to forgive them, and we struggle with forgiving them. And it's like, how can we, I'm going to forgive you, but, I'm angry at you, and I'm justifiably angry at you. And why is it that if I forgive you, I feel like God's just going to let you off without paying any penalty, without any consequences to your actions? And it's the injustice of the injury that they caused us that irks us, that causes us to struggle with God. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to forgive them, yet they're going to go on about their lesson and hurt other people or not learn their lesson. And so Leviticus chapter 6, verses 1 through 6 covers this in the law of the trespass. And it says this, that if a brother trespasses against you, in that he has lied to you, or in fellowship, as the King James Version says, or that he was given something to keep and then he lied about it because he used it, he stole it, used it for his own good, or he stole something from you. The Lord gives several hypothetical examples there. And he says, to make it right, if he wants to be forgiven by God, he has to restore the thing which he got by deceit, or measure up to the lie which he gave to you, or in other ways make it right. And he says, add 20% interest as 20%. So in other words, if you loan somebody your $300 leather coat, and you say, hey, keep this for me for a week or so, I'm moving, and when I get moved in, I want to add, this to my wardrobe. Maybe you give them a whole bunch of clothes and stuff to hang in the closet temporarily, and you come back, and there's, among those clothes, there's your leather jacket is missing. And they sit there and they say, well, I didn't see a leather jacket, but secretly they stole it, and then maybe they sold it for money. Now, God says if you want to be forgiven, if you want to make it right, you have to to be restored vertically, you have to make it right horizontally, and you have to add 20% interest. So they would have to give you the coat back plus $60. And then he says you go to the priest, and the priest will make atonement for you, and it will be forgiven. See, in other words, what God is saying here is this, that unless you make it right horizontally, he's not going to forgive you vertically. And this is the great thing here to understand, that the vertical is the guilt and the horizontal is the injury. And all that's taught in most Christian circles who don't know their Jewishness, their Jewish roots, or frankly the New Testament, because it's throughout the New Testament as well, is that they just emphasize that you have to forgive them vertically. And so when we say we've got to forgive them vertically, and leave off the fact that they have a responsibility to restore that which was given, or that which was taken, or that which was lied about. They have a responsibility to restore, to address the injury they caused and add interest to it. In other words, they've got to show an eagerness, a zealousness to make things right. Then they'll be forgiven. And we're just taught, we've got to do this vertically, and everything is all and well, and all is forgiven, and we just go on about our lives. No. They have to make it right in the injury, because God created us with the righteous sense of right and wrong. And when something is unjust, it irks us. It makes us angry. We've been injured, and we want restitution. And lest you think that this is goofy or something, remember in Revelation 6 when the Apostle John was in heaven and he saw multitudes before the throne. And they cried out and they said, how long, O Lord, until you bring vengeance upon those who killed us, who caused our deaths? So even in heaven, they're looking for, maybe they forgive them vertically, but horizontally, they are looking for restitution. They're looking for someone to pay for the injury that they caused, the horizontal. And so this is where Christianity misses it, is that there's a whole lot of people there who say, okay, I just forgive vertically, and then what do I do about the injury? Well, in 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 14, Paul said, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. The Lord will repay him according to what he did. Now, at my first arraignment in court, no man stood with me, but I pray God will not lay this to their charge. So there in about 4 verses, Paul says, on the one hand, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm, that's the horizontal, and I want God to repay him according to his actions. In other words, Paul is saying, I'll forgive him vertically, but he's in God's hands after that. But on his friends who did not go with him into court, maybe they were afraid of being identified with the Roman authorities and everything else as a Christian, etc., etc. But Paul said, no man stood with me. I pray God will not lay this to their charge. To that injury that Paul sustained where his friends abandoned him when he went to go appear before the judge under the guilt of being a Christian, he said, I pray the Lord will not lay this to the charge. In other words, Paul is saying, I forgive them vertically. I'm also forgiving them of the injury horizontally. Now, here's the thing. When Jesus said in Mark chapter 11, verses 25 and 26, as you stand praying, forgive if you have aught against any, because if you don't forgive the trespasses of others, then God can't forgive you your trespasses. That's straight out of the New Testament, straight out of the Lord's Prayer. The principle is this, that we are to forgive vertically those who have trespassed against us. We forgive them vertically. But folks, it's their responsibility to make it right for the injury that they caused. See, what Jesus is saying in Mark 11, 25 and 26 has nothing to do with heaven and hell. It has nothing to do with heaven and hell, because he used the word trespass. As you stand praying, forgive if you have aught against, in the King James Version, against any. For if you don't forgive them their trespasses, the Father can't forgive you your trespasses. In other words, it's that bind or loose on earth is bound or loosed in heaven. You forgive the trespass, but that doesn't excuse them from having to make it right. So that brother-in-law who keeps borrowing money but never seems to grow by it, never seems to benefit by it, never seems to make it right, you have a right to cut them off. If they won't own up to the injury that they are causing you because they're taking money out of your own hands and refusing to own up to it and measure up to it and pay it back and everything, you have the right to cut them off. There's a point there where the injury that happens to you, you don't have to endure that. You turn one cheek, you get slapped on one side, you turn the other, but you don't become a whipping post. You walk an extra mile with somebody, but you don't walk a marathon. And Jesus placed limitations, as did the Mosaic Law, put limitations on what you should do in terms of walking in love and walking with a person. Eventually, you expect that toddler to walk on their own, and as long as they don't have the ability, you'll pick them up after they fall down as they're learning to walk, but at some point they have the ability to walk, and if they fall down, they have to get themselves back up. So what do you do with the trespass and the sin? The sin you forgive, and you can forgive the trespasses. But like Paul said, there's Alexander the coppersmith will face the ramifications, the consequences of his actions. There may be people in your life that you say, Father, I forgive them vertically and I forgive them horizontally because I don't think they're ever going to make it right with me, and add 20% interest to that. They're never going to show that zeal and that eagerness to make it right with me and to restore this relationship. And I'll forgive them for how they hurt me. But Father, they do need to learn a lesson. And so you actually help them become a greater disciple if you say, Father, I want you to deal with them. So the injury, you place limits on it, and it is right to expect a recompense, to expect, as Leviticus chapter 6, 1-6 says, a restoration of that which was stolen or that which they got by deceit or something which they lied about. It's right to expect restitution to help the injury, restore the injury. We still have to forgive vertically, and you need to forgive their trespasses, which is an act of the vertical forgiveness, but it does not excuse them from doing the right thing. So that sister so-and-so who's backbiting you during the week and then goes up to sing the special on Sunday morning, she may think she's all right before God. No, she's not. If she hasn't made it right for you and she dies, when she gets to heaven, she'd have to deal with that to the Lord personally. How do I know that? Because in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 3-15, Paul talked about them having envy and strife and divisions among them. And he said that this is wood, hay, and stubble, that if you die and you carry that with you into heaven, it will be burned away when you stand before Jesus. Yet you yourselves will be saved, but as one who's gone through the fire. Not everybody's going to go to you. And in fact, you don't have the ability often because so much time has passed. And same with me, same with anybody. Time has passed. You think, oh boy, I wish I'd done this differently 20 years ago. That doesn't mean you have to go back and make restitution to everybody, from before you knew Christ or brand new in the Lord or something like that. Sometimes people have just moved on and it's immaterial. But for fresh things I'm talking about. People who are in envy, strife, and division, Paul said in Romans 16:17, he said, mark them and avoid them. The word mark there in the King James is actually where we get the word scope, S-K-O-P-O-S, scopos. It means keep an eye on them and avoid them because they put a snare, a stumbling block in front of people. There's lots of occasions there to judge a person by their fruit. And having been burned once, you don't have to get burned twice. So anyway, I'm kind of throwing a lot out there, but it all comes under the heading of there is the sin and there is the trespasses. We were dead in our sins and our trespasses, but God has made us alive. And the sin deals with the guilt, the trespass deals with the injury. We forgive them of what they have done to us, but it is up to them to restore the thing that they lied about or apologize for the hurt they caused, or in other way address the injury that they caused us. So it's not unchristian of you to forgive them and yet at the same time expect an accountability, expect them to face some consequences of their actions. And that's where you can pray to the Father and say, Father, I forgive them, but don't let them hurt other people. And then place a distance between you so you don't get burned again. All right, gotta go. Went a little bit long, but I hope this has been a blessing to you. See you next week.